lot of people assume that I only do animals because I have done a lot of paintings, woodcuts, and prints of animals over the last about 15 or so, maybe a little longer. But actually for many years before that, I was doing almost all images of people, generally people I know, that I would take photographs of in different situations and then use that as a sample to do usually I do a sketch first on the raw canvas or on the gesso canvas, and then start to bring in color a little at a time. And actually back in Dallas, before we moved here in 1988, I was using a lot of oil sticks, and then they started to, in Dallas they would get really hot and it was very hard to, had trouble drying on stuff. And so I didn't do them for a while, and then sort of came back to them about a year ago or so when a friend of mine was cleaning out their studio and her partner had passed and she didn't use them, so I got a bunch more of them and said, oh yeah, I remember these. And so it's more highly textured than a regular oil painting would be that I would do, and this did start out as a regular oil and then it's so much more immediate with the oil stick, and I like the fact that they're thick and you can do big strokes or expressionist kinds of strokes. This particular one this is one of those, not unlike, I guess as Katie was talking about things over time, because I actually started this probably about 3-4 years ago, and then it got sort of stuck in the stack and I forgot about it. I never felt it was finished. And then I pulled it out again this winter and started reworking parts of it and adding more oil stick and more texture, and then finally decided, okay, this is about right. And it came from an odd 7-day voyage from Brooklyn to San Diego when my elder daughter was going to start grad school at the UCSD. And so we did this long trip across the country with a friend of hers, Robin, and Anna, my daughter. Anna thought being in a casino was the most vile thing she'd ever done in her life, which is kind of interesting because she's a kind of wild child. But the casino was like, that was the limit. And so she's totally perturbed, and what am I doing here? This is just give me some money, Mom, instead of putting it into these stupid machines. And then Robin was just the opposite, which is, I can't stop, I gotta do every game here. And so it was kind of fun watching them throughout. We were there actually for an extra day after having been in down at the various museums and stuff across the country. It stopped in Dallas, and then the next stop, I guess, was Vegas. And it was a lot of fun being there, but it was also one of the stranger places I've been, because I've just never seen so many people just in a funk, walking up and down sidewalks, totally blitzed out. You know, it's almost like New Orleans, where they all have these giant drinks, and 20 people wide going down sidewalks, and then you could go find a little spot to go into another one of these myriad hotels there, and like the Bellagio, where they have, you know, glass, the entire ceiling is all glass sculpture, and so you could go in and get a little breather from all the insanity on the street. But that was sort of where this one came from. As an artist, really, it goes back a long way. And it sort of started with, speaking of misogynist people and so forth, I was of that generation where people still smoked cigarettes in the painting room when you were in your painting class or drawing class or whatever. You know, it was back then. And there's always, you know, a couple of wacko professors, and they're always hitting on the girls or the young women that are there. And in undergraduate school in particular, I think, but, you know, I had one professor who was constantly on my case about, oh, gotta see your boobs, I've gotta see your boobs. And then, you know, finally one day you just get so angry after a few months of this that you go, here you go, Jack, there they are. Now can you leave me alone? Then he left me alone. But it was like, really? You know, like a lot of us grew up with that. And when the whole hashtag #MeToo thing that Mary talked about came up, that was another thing that bothered me. And I never really was able to figure out how to put that into artwork. Although I did a bunch of political stuff after the election in 2016, all the new, you know, swamp leaders that are in the cabinet right now and so forth. And I haven't gone very far with that. I've had a few in a few different political shows, but those also, of course, were, and that's probably what brought me back to the idea of more figurative work instead of based more on animals. I think the reason I went into the animal thing was I was so tired of humans never being honest, never doing, never caring for their fellow people, men, women, and children. And animals just seemed more copacetic. They love humans, most of them. Not all, but certainly our domesticated ones do. And so I sort of focused on that for a long time. And I've been doing printmaking since I was in high school, actually, when I finally was able to get into an art class my senior year, because they were so sought after that if your parents didn't know the teacher, you didn't get into a class, because there was only a small amount of art courses back then. But as a senior, that's when I sort of got into it. Thought I was going to be a lawyer. Went to undergraduate school with that intention, and then took a drawing class as a general education requirement, and that flipped my major. And then it was nothing but art. I did 3D design, 2D design, I did sculpture, I did performance work, I've done just about every media that exists, which I don't know is all that beneficial in the long run, because I think people who are more focused on a specific media and a specific idea and repeating that idea over and over and over again are actually the more successful artists when it comes to money and sales. But I didn't choose that route. I chose to do what I like best, which is dealing with what's around me and the people around me, the animals around me, and so forth. One of the early pieces that I did, that was actually a senior project in undergrad, was a piece called Sodomy, which was a lot of sod, and I had two friends burying me in the sod, and then I had to rise out of the sod. I didn't realize how heavy the sod was going to be, and so everybody's standing around going, "Is she going to rise? Is she going to rise?" And I finally get the first batch off my face, and then it gets lighter and lighter, and I was finally able to rise from the ground. And then from there went to New Mexico, where I studied painting and printmaking with Garo Antrishan, who was called the godfather of lithography, and was one of the primary writers for the Tamarind Institute out in Albuquerque, where people like Jim Dine and Robert Rauschenberg and all these amazing artists would be there all the time in the summers, making all their print series and stuff. And so we got a lot of amazing visiting artists at the University of New Mexico. Harmony Hammond, Joyce and Max Kozlov. It's just so many. Philip Perlstein. And all of these, Robert Oppenheim, who we all protested and refused to work with because he wanted to pour oil down the side of the mountain. And so we decided not to participate and had a little protest about that. But he did it anyway. And he took off with one of our undergraduates, as usual. But it's a funny thing, the art world. Anybody have any questions? I don't know how long I've been talking.
Thank you, Holly.
Welcome.